Hey, it's Halu. In my last scout guide, I explained how to dodge scouts in 1v1s from mid to close range on every class. This video, however, is completely about Scout v Scout, which for a lot of people is extremely boring since their idea of Scout v Scout is to just press A and D really quick and pray that they hit a luckier shot than their opponent. Which is true for the vast majority of Scout players, though that's mostly because they aren't even close to the skill ceiling in this game. If you've ever seen the Scouts with the very best DM in the game today play, it should be obvious that all of their playstyles revolve around movement, which isn't some crazy coincidence. It's just better to play and learn Scout this way than to spend thousands of hours to be an above average floor Roomba. There have been attempts in the past to explain how this playstyle works, namely by Dolphin Writer with his giant essays on TF2, but this is my attempt at explaining it in a way that is hopefully easy to understand and apply. I'll try to keep this section brief since there's a lot that can be said, but the main reason why movement playstyles are better than any other style is due to how efficient it is. In a normal 1v1 between two decent scouts, the entire fight comes down to who can hit more shots while AD spamming. But there's a limit to how well you can apply your mechanics when all you do is press two keys quickly and pray that your mouse control is good enough to hit the other player. It's no surprise then that these players are incredibly inconsistent, and if you were to ask them why they lost a 1v1, they would simply say that they should have hit more shots. While a high-level movement playstyle revolves around reducing your inputs by using movement to make yourself harder to hit and the enemy easier to hit. This approach has a higher skill ceiling because the less inputs you put in, the less chances for you to make mistakes when applying your mechanics, and the more mindful you can be while playing. And when your mechanics are consistent, the sole determiner on whether you win or lose a 1v1 is decision making, which leads to a long-term improvement in game sense, with the end goal of course being that your decision making is good enough to win 1v1s against players with better mechanics. Strafe aiming is a set of movement patterns meant to ensure that your crosshair is on the target above all else by using strafes to minimize mouse movement. The two main patterns of strafe aiming is mirror and anti-mirror. Mirror is when you move in the same direction as your opponent. Because you and the enemy scout move at the same speed, it's possible to keep your aim completely still while mirroring, allowing you to track them perfectly and get a high damage meat shot. At the same time, this allows the enemy scout to mirror you back, so it's best to use this pattern quickly so that the other scout can't respond in time. Of course, in game, players don't move in giant sweeping long strafes like they do in Kovacs, so you end up only being able to mirror your opponent for very brief moments, making it difficult to use if you aren't ready for the opportunity. Try to mirror the other scout when they can't change directions without compromising their position or when you have a read on the other player. In this example, notice how I predict Yum Yum trying to run past my side by jumping onto the terrain besides me. Or in this example, how I wait for him to perform his second jump so that he can change directions in the air. The anti-mirror is the opposite of the mirror in which you move in the opposing direction of the opponent. This forces you to track the opponent continuously as the angle between you and the enemy scout widens the farther you move from each other. But it also forces the enemy to do the same unless they change directions. This dynamic benefits players who know they can out-aim their opponent, though if you're playing against a player who changes directions often, it will take an even greater level of mouse control to perform anti-mirror strafes effectively. As a general tip, it's better to mirror your opponent when you're absolutely confident that you can hit the shot first and then dodge before the other player can react in time. But if you can't find this opportunity, it's better to use anti-mirror strafes so that you can at least attempt to out-aim your opponent in the damage exchange. Though it's important to keep in mind that even if there's no opportunity available to mirror your opponent, you can always just create one by using your movement to probe a reaction from the other player. For example, if you're losing a damage exchange badly, there's no point in continuing to trade damage since you will more than likely lose the 1v1 from chip shots. Instead, it makes more sense to focus entirely on dodging the other scout and setting up an opportunity where you can either end the fight or leave. In this clip, I'm on 1 HP and instead of trying to spam SWAT behind cover, I push him knowing that it would be impossible to win the 1v1 the longer the fight draws out. So while it's definitely stupid on paper, if you're confident that you are 99% fucked, you might as well play with even more risk.
9 health! Why would you push with 9 health? I hate idiots!
Oh my god.
What the fuck? He killed all of you?
You guys are honestly so bad.
AD spam is pretty self-explanatory. You move left and right quickly. This movement is extremely hard to track and is basically a counter to players who over-rely on strafe aiming since they can't properly react to each of your strafe changes. The trade-off, however, is that your positioning is static and your view angle is reduced greatly. When a scout is AD spamming, the range of motion that they can move their mouse is reduced since they won't be parallel with you if they change that angle. The idea of staying parallel with the other scout is that if your strafes are smaller than theirs, they are almost guaranteed to move past your crosshair at some point. Because of this, scouts will often keep their mouse minimally still while AD spamming so that they just have to time their shots for when the other scout runs past their crosshair. Typically, this looks like flicking to the target and then AD spamming. This is best done when you are holding an angle on the map, such as a corner or a corridor, as it prevents the other scout from rotating around you and allows you to consistently hit shots when they pass your crosshair. Another common trick is to AD spam briefly so that you can bait out the other scout into pushing one of your sides, and then to mirror them quickly. If we take a look at the mirror example against Yum Yum again, I was able to predict that he would push my left side since I was using AD spam to hold the entire path along the train, forcing him to concede his space unless he wants to trade damage with me where I have immediate cover. However, it's best to not over-rely on terrain for AD spam, as it can be countered by players who simply strafe into obstructive terrain and refuse to strafe out. This works because the other scout will often wait for you to strafe out of the terrain and into their crosshair, which delays their shot and allows you the chance to set up a high damage meat shot. This is especially useful as a surprise tactic to instantly win a 1v1 since most scouts begin by trading damage. Other counters to AD spam includes pushing one of their sides by circling into them so that they can't remain parallel with you, or to read the shooting pattern of the other player and to time your movement to be off rhythm with their own, making sure that it's most intense the moment they commit to aiming. The better you are at probing for certain reactions, the easier it is to abuse poor positioning. There's a lot that goes into this, but here's the most basic way you can think of it. When two scouts spot one another, or in the case of MG, when you or the opponent spawn, both players move towards the distance where they are most comfortable trading damage. As a general rule, when a player is farther than this distance, they will push forward, and when they are closer, they will move back. There are of course other factors like whether you or your opponent have a health advantage or need to reload, but generally this is how all Scout 1v1s start. This is important to recognize because the vast majority of scouts I've played against are terrible at controlling space and recognizing when to hold their ground. The best example I can give is how players mindlessly move onto terrain without accounting for how fast I can take advantage of this. In these examples, the other scout immediately paths to the bridge without recognizing that I can just push him the moment he moves forward, which forces him into bad positions. While I'm obviously taking a risk by immediately long strafing, it allows me to begin damage trading before he's even ready, which gives me an opportunity to win the damage exchange immediately by taking advantage of how much space he gives up when approaching me. When he tries to do the same back to me, I'm much more patient with my movement, which protects the space between us and stops him from being able to push me without taking a lot of damage. This is probably the most common pitfall of scout mains that try to emulate Banny or Yum Yum's playstyle, where they end up jumping and moving around onto terrain just for the sake of it. Anytime you're trying to close distance or protect the position while trading damage, it's almost always better to stay grounded so that you can change directions faster and move more methodically. If you're trying to set up a situation where you can end the fight as soon as possible with a high damage meat shot, then it's fine to jump around and use terrain. If you want to use terrain effectively while jumping and rotating around the map, you should know how to adjust your movement and aim so that they don't stay perfectly synced. That is to say, one shouldn't limit the other. You would be surprised by how many invite players still have to look where they are going before jumping, or are just completely clueless on how to anticipate angles when moving around terrain. In all of these examples, had he been holding the angle between his strafe and my own, he could have easily protected the area I was long strafing into. But because he had to flick in the other direction to jump onto the rock, I was able to push the open side over and over again and find different opportunities. Whenever you are moving around terrain, try to position your crosshair so that you have at least one guaranteed hit in the direction you are strafing, since it's much harder to hit a shot when you are moving away from an angle. Another application of this concept is in juking the other player with your jumps. When a player holds W, their aim is locked to a front-facing angle. An easy way to abuse this is to jump forwards, left or right into their sides when they are holding W, so that they end up chasing your jump with both their aim and their movement, and then to jump backwards so that their aim gets crossed up. If you do this correctly, it becomes very easy to stall the other scout's movement and line up easy shots. The more you can get into the other player's side, the wider you can pull apart their aim. As you get more comfortable doing this, you will eventually understand when you can just jump past their sides without getting hit at all, a trick that also works well against soldiers. If you struggle with separating your movement from your aim, you should first learn how to move onto terrain without looking at it, then learn how to move in straight lines in all directions while spinning slowly left and right. Doing this teaches you how to move seamlessly even if your aim is opposing your movement. That's more or less the full extent of my knowledge without going into detail on every specific scenario that might happen in a 1v1. That being said, these are a bunch of tricks that didn't really fit into what I said. There are times when dodging side to side is less effective than dodging forward and back. A good way to abuse this is to use really tight strafes while head faking both sides, so that the other scout overreacts to your side movements and doesn't adjust to your forward movements. The trade-off is that it's extremely hard to aim while doing this, but it's a good trick if you need to reload in front of a player without any cover around you. There's also a pretty well-known clip of Jay doing this on process against two scouts. If you are close enough to the other scout where you can easily see where they are aiming through their scouter gun angle, move in the other direction. If you are at a distance where it's hard to see their scatter gun, just move in the opposite direction of their tracers. If you do this well, you can continue to move in the opposite direction of their crosshair, and then change directions the moment they flick onto you so that they over-aim. Trying to permanently track another scout takes too much effort, and flicking wildly will make you inconsistent. Try to keep the other scout centered at all times by tracking the general area they are in, and then making small flicks when you are actively aiming at them. Unless you want to spend thousands of hours playing Scout, you should play Kovacs. Most competitive TF2 players have awful aim compared to the people who play CSGO or Quake competitively. So I recommend everyone at least learn how to track smoothly without tensing your hand, regardless if you play Scout or not. For Scout players, you should focus on strafe aim scenarios, as they teach you how to be really quick at immediately reading the bot and reacting with your movement, which mimics how you would use strafe aim in game. And speaking from my own experience, besides talent and luck, playing Kovacs has helped me a lot in learning how to play Scout quickly. If you just want to improve your overall mouse control, you should play the Voltaic benchmarks and try to get to at least Jade Complete. Anything past that is probably overkill, since TF2 is primarily a movement shooter, and having good aim is only a third of what it takes to have good DM. There's also a bunch of ways you can adjust PC settings to make TF2 more responsive, like messing with configs, deep loaded window OSs, and much more. This might seem like a lot, but the game is unplayable for me 99% of the day, so in the rare moments when I'm not lagging, I'd rather have the smoothest experience I can get. In the description, I linked a Google Doc that has a very long list of ways to optimize your PC. I've also linked my config because I swear to God you fuckers can't stop asking for it. That's all the advice I can give without watching every person play individually, and I probably won't make another video, so if you have a question or something nice to say, feel free to comment. And thank you for watching.